Hi, everybody. My name is Angie Vishianan. I am the founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program that connects prospective law students to lawyers for mentoring so they can learn a little bit more about law school before deciding to dive headfirst in. And we started hosting these Zoom meetups every Tuesday and Thursday at noon Central to bring on lawyers and experts in our field to help give students some ideas of what they should be expecting when they get into law school, how should they be applying to law school, and what are some strategies that they can apply to prepare for their legal careers. So today I have a very special guest with me. Mike Spivey is actually on for the second time. He came on in June and didn't ask me anything, and it was fantastic. We had a ton of questions, and so I asked him to come back again for round two. So here he is again, and I think we'll go ahead and start with a bit of a recap of this current admission cycle since we're now in August. The current admission cycle is wrapping up, and then we'll be proceeding into the new admission cycle here in the fall. So Mike, if you can give us a quick recap of this cycle, and then
Sure.
we'll dive into the Q&A for next time.
So hi, everyone. I'm happy to be back. Thank you all. I have a beautiful Colorado backdrop behind these blinds, but if I open these blinds, it gets really bright and you can't see me. So we made the strategic decision to not show you the beautiful Colorado backdrop. This past cycle was obviously interesting. It was unique. Unless you were a dean of admission in 1918 during the Spanish flu, it was unique to admissions offices. It started off with an extremely high volume of high-scoring applicants. So people 165 and above, but particularly 170 to 180 were up, I think, 10, 15, even 20% early in the cycle. As it always does, large numbers and small cohorts, whether they're way up or way down, tend to regress towards the mean. So that those high scores came down slowly as the cycle progressed. I would still say last cycle was a competitive cycle. What I mean by that is it was a more difficult cycle to be admitted to than the previous year. Was it more competitive than the most competitive admission cycles I've ever seen? Not even close. So competitive to me, I've done this for over 20 years, is always relative, but it seemed for, the typical law school applicant has a 1-year institutional memory of the application process. And for the typical applicant, it probably seemed competitive because they are comparing it versus the year before. It's essentially over. So it looks like Harvard decreased their class size by about 60 people. And maybe because of deferral requests and lack of ability to take off the wait list, it's pretty rare for a law school to decrease their class size by that much. And I could easily make a public speculation why they did it, but I'm hesitant to do it publicly. But I doubt we're going to see any more waitlist movement from Harvard. And because Harvard is near the top in such a large school, they generally trigger these microwaves down the process. It's what, August 3rd, is that right? August 4th? Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see a little bit of scatter plot waitlist movement for the next 2 weeks. People will not show up to virtual orientation. People will get cold feet. Law schools will assuredly make more waitlist admits. I don't know which ones, but since people always ask me, yes, I believe top 14 law schools will still make admits, but they will be shotgun admits. There won't be waves of admits. In aggregate, you might see in the top 50 law schools 100, even 200 more admits off the wait list for this cycle. 200 sounds like a large number, but keep in mind, if you took the entire wait list of one school, Columbia, they probably have 2,000 people on the wait list. So if you take the top 50 law schools and say, all right, they might make 200 more wait list admits in the next 2 weeks, it's a relatively small percentage of the wait list pool. That hopefully, is that a good enough recap of this past cycle and what to expect?
Yeah, I think, one of the main things that most people who registered were asking is, do you think there's a significant number of deferrals from this cycle that are going to make next cycle much more competitive, or what's
Right.
your sense?
So assuredly, there are more deferrals this cycle than I'm going to guess. There's more deferrals than I've seen in my 20 plus years of doing admissions. I can't say that for a fact, but I do, because we don't know the deferral number yet. We'll know that in September, October. But I would say most assuredly there's a large number of deferrals. I heard from a school that I can't name that they have something like 60 to 100 deferrals. So if you think about that, they're starting off with 60 to 100 theoretical seat deposits. I don't know this school's contract, and applicants have free will, right? So just because you defer to a school doesn't mean you have to show up to that school next year.
Right.
But depending on the school, it might mean that you can't apply to other schools this year, depending what the deferral contract says. There are going to be schools, very likely that start off, with a surplus. So if they're running on a track 400 meters, they're already 20 or 40 meters into that 400 meter dash, whereas in past years, maybe they only started off 5 meters. I put things in running analogies all the time. Hopefully that's helpful. So, they're ahead, but I don't necessarily think that means that they're going to have a more difficult it's going to be a more difficult cycle, because ever since the Great Recession in 2008, central universities, what you would refer to as undergrad schools, have been supporting, and in many cases, more or less underwriting law schools. So we're looking at, multiple years of central university funding for law schools. That money is I don't know how to say this, but it is going to be a miserable next 4 to 5 to 6 to even 10 years in higher education. Funding from the federal, state level is going to shore up, is going to not shore up, is going to diminish greatly. And in 2026, applications are going to go down about 33% because people dramatically stopped having children during the Great Recession. And that's going to hit universities in a few years. And they're aware.
Do you think the lack of funding or the decreases in funding are going to significantly impact scholarships, or the fact that they already have admitted a good number of people is going to impact scholarships? How do you think that's going to work out?
Yeah, that's where I was going. What I think is going to happen is I think law schools are going to, on the positive side, have to increase their class sizes to stay financially viable. For 20 plus years, I've been hearing the following: law schools need to stop giving as much scholarship money because they can't afford to. And for 20 plus years, that hasn't happened. We're at something like 70% of law school students receive some form of scholarship. I just, they can't play this U.S. News World Report game of buying LSAT scores and GPAs at the expense of their school being in the red financially forever. They can't. I mean, they can, but they and if there's so much pressure from faculty, et cetera, they'll keep playing that game and then they'll go out of business. Because you can't viably, I run a company, you run a company, you can't be in the red year after year after year and stay afloat.
Yeah, it does help when you do have an undergraduate institution underwriting you, but you can't do it forever.
That's exactly the point. They've had that backstop, that backdrop, and they're about to lose that.
Right.
So what I think is going to happen is I don't necessarily think this will be a more competitive cycle. I think applications will be up.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll be up at the top, so I don't think you're going to see all this like competition at the top, which tends to make things more competitive because of less movement. But I do think there'll be less money. I do think there'll be less money. This may be, if everyone on this Zoom call is applying this coming cycle, they may not have it figured quite out yet. So maybe they mistakenly give out more merit aid than they should. And maybe you threaded the eye of the needle. I would say two years from now, the scholarship money is going to be just dramatically less than it is than this past year.
That's good to know. That's good to know. All right. So since we're now going to open it up to Q&A, I'd like to give priority to the people who are actually on the call. So if you want to go ahead and ask questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat box or to get on video and unmute yourself and ask them. If there are no questions that are coming from the audience, then I'll go ahead and ask questions from the registration list. So I think there's already a question in the chat box, so we'll go to Jess's question first. So hi, Mike. I would love some information about that would be helpful for splitters. She has a 3.4, 3.5 GPA, 170, 175 LSAT, applying next cycle. Are there any top 50 or top 20 schools that are especially splitter friendly? And are there anything that splitters can do to be more competitive?
So we get a lot of questions about splitters and reverse splitters. Which is funny because in admissions, you're not thinking about it as much as applicants do. I would say if you're, I don't know if this person has two scores, a 170 and a 175, or if they're just intimating that their score is between a 170 and 175 because they don't want to theoretically out their score. Either way, if you're talking about top 50, top 20, you're going to get a lot of admits with a score in the one. I mean, even if your LSAT's a 170, between the range of 170 and 175, you're above the median LSAT for the vast majority of top 20 law schools, top 50 law schools. And LSAT is 12% of U.S. News and World Report rankings. GPA is 10%. And actually, when you break it down in nuance levels, it doesn't quite work like that, but a lot of law schools aren't aware of that. So if you have a high LSAT, don't let them know that. What I would say is early on, most law schools, I would flip it around and say, not are there some law schools that are splitter friendly? I would say that there are only a few law schools early cycle that are GPA heavy. It is without a doubt certain that LSAT in the 170 range is a less common commodity than a GPA in the 3.85 or above range. There are tens of thousands of applicants who apply to law school with a 3.8 or above. Right? I mean, yep. But we know that there are not nearly as many that have a 170 or above. So even if you remove ranking from considerations, you are a less common applicant, and less common applicants stand out early. So what I would say if you're a splitter, and by splitter, I'm just going to say if your applicant is above the median outside of the schools you want to go to, generally early cycle, you tend to have better results. That doesn't mean if you're a reverse splitter and your GPA is above the medians, you're not going to have good results, but it might mean you have to wait a little longer.
So besides GPA and LSAT scores, what other elements do law school admissions heavily rely on?
Yeah, I mean, diversity is very important to the law school community, as it should be. And it might even be more important. When we use, in admissions, when we use the term underrepresented minority, what we mean is there's a group of applicants who come from groups, ethnic groups, minority groups that don't apply to law school in as many numbers as the population which suggests they should. Black, African American, Hispanic, Native American tend to be less represented than the population numbers in general. So that kind of diversity is very important to law schools. Gender diversity is around 50-50. There's actually a few more female than male applicants, but that doesn't come into play as much. Believe it or not, geographic diversity kind of matters. I'll give you an example. When I was in admissions at Vanderbilt Law School, we had alumni from every state but North Dakota. So every time we would get an applicant from North Dakota, we would stop what we were doing. I'm not even joking, and read their file to see if they were wanted to admit them, because we wanted an alumnus from North Dakota so we could say we have alumni from all 50 states. Now, don't go and move to North Dakota and set up citizenship, because I don't know what schools you're applying to and how important that is to them. But you can expand diversity now, if you're thinking along the terms I'm thinking, to differentiation. all admissions is literally is one word, is differentiation. The easiest way to differentiate is a 180. You're at the 99.999 percentile. A 4.2 differentiates empirically, but there are thousands of ways to differentiate in the application process. Which, if there weren't, I wouldn't have a business, right? Every year we can look at our firm's clients' results relative to results of people with the same numbers and see that they tend to be a little bit better, because all we do as a company is help our clients take those thousands of things about them that differentiate and highlight them in a non-aggressive, non-overly assertive way in the application process. So when you're applying to law schools, you want to think about yourself not in terms of, how do I impress this admissions committee that I don't even know anything about? But what you really want to do is you want to think about yourself as, how do I differentiate from the typical person applying to law school?
Which I think is really funny, because I think so many applicants think that there is an ideal type of law student and they actually want to be more like that ideal applicant. And it's like, no. You should be trying to make yourself different, not the same.
In everything qualitatively, so beyond GPA and LSAT, you want to be differentiated in a positive way. I mean, obviously you can have 5 DUIs and that would although
that's not a good differentiator, by the way.
I've seen that number of DUIs in an application before. You generally don't get admitted with 5. Very much so. But if you can positively differentiate, that's how you get admitted.
Mike, I'm paying for my law school education on my own. I'm currently a rising junior with a 3.9 GPA, but haven't taken the LSAT yet. I was wondering if you know how I can find schools that offer competitive scholarships, or what I can do to make myself more competitive for a full ride.
Yeah, so I think the GPA was 3.9 something. Is that accurate?
3.9 GPA.
Yeah, so you're already above every school's median GPA. Let's pretend your dream school. I hate using schools' names because then I often get phone calls from those schools. I'm going to say Princeton Law School. And let's say their median GPA or median LSAT is a 169. Even with the scholarship numbers coming down, the merit amounts coming down, also keeping in mind that Harvard, Yale, and Stanford historically have never given out merit scholarships. They do give out need-based scholarship. But even with the scholarship monies coming down, if you're above both schools' median, they will find a way to make tuition more affordable for you. So if you're above both medians, see, the people who I think are going to get hurt by the recessive economy are not the people who are above both medians for a school. They're the people who split the medians. So for this applicant, I would say the best thing you can do is get an LSAT score. If you can do better, get another LSAT score. And if you can do better, get a third LSAT score. Always behooves you to have the highest LSAT score possible in your 3 takes that you get in 1 year. But then if you're above both medians, you're still going to get a lot of scholarship money.
Now, Mike, I know that the ABA 509 reports do say like how many percentages of students are receiving scholarship aid, and then what's like the 75%, 25% percentile of aid that they're receiving. How consistent is that from year to year? Like if you pull that data from last year, how likely is it that it's going to be similar this year?
I mean, normally it's both consistent and steadily rising. Mm-hmm. So a school like Wash U that gives out tons of merit aid, the following year also gives out tons of merit aid, but even a little more. The problem is that because of COVID and things we just talked about, I'm worried that gradual. So we see. I mean, this is on our website. Near the top of our blog, spiveyconsulting.com, and in the blog is a post about predicting this upcoming cycle. And in that post, I believe we show scholarship amount, and it slowly goes up like this over the years. But I think what we're going to see is unfortunately this. But again, I think that's going to be more impactful for splitters and reverse splitters. If let me put it in the best terms possible. If I were applying to law school and not having a bunch of debt, a bunch of student loans was important to me, I would specifically be targeting schools where I'm above both medians. I wouldn't get obsessed with this T10 or T6 phenomena if I needed scholarship money, because I wouldn't want to take on $200,000 worth of debt. So if that were the case, I would make sure that even if you apply to a school where you might be below one of their medians, I would make sure I have a cluster of schools where I'm above both their medians. That'll be more important this coming cycle than it was in previous cycles.
Okay, awesome. In terms of geographical diversity you mentioned, does it extend outside of the United States? Where do international students in terms of this diversity?
Yeah, sure. If you're, again, and it's all about differentiation, there's a lot of South Korean applicants to law school. There's a lot of applicants to law school from China. There's a good number from Germany and the UK. There are, a fractionally small number from New Zealand or Sweden. So if a law school is looking at an application and you're from, Bahrain, you're probably going to positively differentiate. If you're from Djibouti, you're probably going to positively differentiate. If you're from China, maybe not so much so. Although I've read some stunningly attractive, from an admission standpoint, applications from people from China, from like rural Chinese villages that had never left their village. I read an application years ago from someone from Afghanistan, from a small refugee camp in Afghanistan. That obviously really stood out.
Okay, and I think, do you handle transfer applicants, Mike, or do you only work with incoming?
Yeah, our firm does, and when I was in admissions, I was in charge of transfer admissions. So.
Okay, great. We have a question about transferring. Jeremy, you want to jump on and ask?
Sure. So I have a question as far as transferring, given everything that's going on. I know that admission numbers are going down this year, as you said, because of deferrals, but you guess that next year they're going to go up. Or you figure they're going to go up. What's going to happen what do you think is going to happen as far as transferring? Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen as far as transferring? So I'm already a rising 1L, and I start in like 3 weeks. But one of my plans is to probably transfer out. What do you think is going to happen with transferring students regarding this next cycle coming up?
Yeah. Yeah. So don't say what school you're at. Right. I wouldn't want that school knowing that you're thinking about transferring. You could almost see like a rigged system. It would be highly suspicious. In fact, if they did rig your grades against you so you couldn't transfer out, find me and I'll find you a good lawyer and we'll all split the bill. But what I would say is this: to begin with, I would say, and I kid you not, about 95% of people who tell me they plan on transferring end up not wanting to transfer.
Okay.
I can't tell you how many people I've met in my life who aspired to go to Harvard Law School or Stanford Law School, who ended up going to Penn or Duke or somewhere, who have reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm a rising Penn 1L, but I've all my life I've wanted to go to Harvard, and I didn't get in, so I'm going to transfer." And then a month later, they say, "You know what? I absolutely love it here. I love my classmates. I love my faculty. Never mind." But obviously, people transfer every year, so not everyone falls into that category. I think transfer admission is going to become more competitive because I think schools are going to have larger transfer. Schools are going to have larger transfer classes, which is good, but I think there's going to be larger numbers of people transferring because of the whole COVID situation and this being a more difficult past cycle. So you'll have slightly larger transfer classes because schools need more revenue. Keep in mind, most transfer students don't get scholarship money, merit scholarship money. So again, if you're going to, I'll say a school name because I know their dean very well and she won't mind. If you're going to UF on a full scholarship, but you aspire to transfer to Duke, maybe that's a great idea, but you're going to lose all that merit money and you're not going to have a Duke class rank. So when you're going through OCI, when an employer looks at you, they're not going to be able to compare you versus the other Duke students all of a sudden. There's an old blog on our website. I don't know the exact name of it, but I talk about the top 10 mistakes in law admissions, and one of them is about transferring. And I think far too many people transfer who should. So just keep in mind, if you transfer, you're going to be compared against a bunch of classmates who have a GPA that's not comparable to yours. Transferring is going to be a little bit more difficult, but here's the good news. I've given you a bunch of bad news, Jeremy. Here's the good news. Statistically, the easiest way to get into law school is a transfer. The selectivity rates are higher for transferring every year than they are for 0L admissions. So if your goal school is Princeton Law School and their 0L selectivity is 8%, their transfer selectivity is probably 20%. And it's much more based on how well you do your first year of law school, which is the best predictor of how well you'll do your second year of law school and your third year, than your LSAT score. So for any transfer student, the thing that they focus on the most is your class rank, your class percentile at the current law school you're at. If 3 months from now you want to transfer, just keep killing it in class.
I'll read your blogs first. I'll make that decision.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So is law school as hard as they make it seem?
I don't know. I took one law. I was part of a PhD program in higher education, and I took higher ed law, and I did very well in that class. I guess I'll immodestly say my law school GPA is a 4.3. So to me, it didn't seem particularly hard, but it was a small class of about 12 people, and the entire class was based on one paper. And I got really lucky. The paper I wrote on happened to be the research topic area of the faculty member who was writing papers. So I got a really good grade, but I think it might have been more because the faculty member loved my topic and not that my paper was an A+ worthy topic. Law school is a ton of, you can speak to this, but law school is a ton of reading. It's more reading than you've ever done in your life times 100. The people who tend to do very well at law school, from my experience on the decanal side, the dean side of things, are the people who stay on top of their reading, are the people who treat it like a job versus a hobby. So when people come into law school and they're just, out at bars, that might be a little bit more difficult in this era. I don't know. It's been a year since I've been to a bar, so I was quarantining before quarantine. But the people who go to bars for the first month and then, look, when I went to business school many, many years ago, the first week of business school, we were out every night. I don't know if we were partying per se, but we were definitely out at bars getting to know one another. But if that had lasted a month or two, I would have been in trouble. In undergrad, you can kind of get away with that. In law school, you absolutely cannot, because once you fall behind, if you're behind for a day or two, maybe you can catch up. But again, you can speak more about this than I can, but if you're behind law school for more than a week, you're dead in the water. You're in a really bad way. So law school is difficult for people who don't treat it seriously early and fall behind. And you're graded on a curve, and that's new to a lot of people. But again, if you stay on top of your reading, if you get to know the professors, here's something interesting. All faculty members have things they like and things they don't like. I was never the brightest student in the classroom, but I was always pretty good at making notes of the subtle things that I knew a faculty member wanted to hear back to them in an essay. You could tell their opinions. Maybe it'll be more difficult over Zoom, but you can follow them on Twitter, right? You can tell their opinions over time. And it's human nature to like what you like. So there's a little cheat sheet for law school.
Yeah, I think law school is difficult because it's hard to know what is your goal. So it feels like there's always like these, two competing goals, right? Doing really, really well on your academics and your grades, and then getting a job. So, I think that the difficult thing is a lot of people go to law school focusing too much on the grades and not realizing, like, hey, at the end of the day, I'm here to actually build a career and get a job. And then, like, they find themselves oh, it's 1L summer and everyone has a job but me, and why? Oh, because all I did was focus on my grades and I didn't actually apply to things because I was waiting for my grades, and oh, a whole bunch of the application deadlines hit in December, but I didn't have grades, so I didn't apply. Like, I mean, there's so many things, like there's all these moving targets. The other difficult thing about law school is it's just very different than anything that you've ever done in undergrad. All of a sudden you're graded with one final grade that's usually an essay exam or one final exam, whatever that may be. But I was also under the impression that all of my exams would be essays, and that was not true at all. I definitely had all exams that were just multiple choice. I had exams that were a combination of those things, short essay, long essay, and multiple choice. I had, professors that did things really, really differently. And if you don't go and look at a past exam that they've offered before, you may be completely surprised when you get down to finals time and all of a sudden they mention, oh yeah, your final exam is going to be 7 multiple choice. You're like, come again? So I think it can just be very shocking for you because you may expect something and it never dawns on you to like second guess that assumption until it's already too late. So I think that your first year, the reason that it's so hard is because you haven't figured out the most effective ways to do anything yet. You're just trying to do everything and hoping to God that that's working, but you don't really know what's working for you. And what works for you in studying may not work for everyone else. And so I think the most difficult thing about law school is learning how to do you. How do you job search the best? How do you network the best? How do you study the best? And it's hard because you're stuck in this piranha tank with a bunch of really competitive piranha that are all doing things differently, and you don't know if you should be doing things the way that they're doing them or the way that you're doing them. So I think that that's what makes law school so difficult. It's hard to stay true to yourself, and it's hard to know who you are. Once you figure that out, though, law school becomes a lot easier. Once you figure out what your priorities are and what you want to focus on, law school becomes a lot easier because you can finally breathe and stop competing with the uber law student that's doing everything in your head, and you can just do you. And so I think that that's what makes it so hard for most people, is that especially if you're going straight like K through JD, kindergarten to Juris Doctor degree, never taking a break to work, you may not have that sense of self yet where you really know yourself and what you do best, what you study best, how you network, all those things. So I think that that's what makes law school hard. I don't think the actual core academics of it is what makes it hard. I think it's all the other mess that is layered on top of it. But
just to summarize 2 words you said that I think are very important. I wouldn't necessarily describe law school as difficult, which is what the question asked, but you use the word competitive, and I would describe law school as very competitive.
Yeah.
And that competition, incidentally, breeds all kinds of weird high school-like insecurities. So just get ready for that.
Very much so. Let's see here. So I don't see any more questions in the chat box yet. So guys, keep them coming. Oh, wait, just got one. Back to the application process. Is it better to address what kind of law you want to practice in the personal statement if you have work experience, or is it better to just leave it open?
Yeah, I mean, everything is relative. So I hate speaking in absolutes, but in general, some of the worst applications I read were the ones that said, I know so and so much about this kind of law, and this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. Those are very tricky personal statements to write. To begin with, you haven't even been to law school. So, when you're telling, something like 80-something% of deans of admission have JDs, or at least a few years ago when we took a look at that. If you're telling someone with a JD how much you know about law, they're invariably going to subconsciously push back against you. If, for example, you interned at a cool legal department for, tell me what a cool company is for 20-year-olds. I don't even know. It's for Spotify. I actually met the general counsel of Spotify, so that's a great one. So if you intern from him, he actually happens to be Swedish too. So that would be great if he applied to law school. Remember I said Swedish. If you intern for Spotify in the legal department under Jared Grissard or whatever his name was, and you talked about that internship, that very well might differentiate. But also keep in mind, a lot of people applying to law school are talking about their work experience. So you would have to even have an angle from there. Let me give you an example. Not only did I intern at Spotify in their legal department, but it was during COVID-19 and I couldn't leave Sweden. And then you could talk about living in Sweden, a country that's going for herd immunity. And all of a sudden you have a unique personal statement. That to me would be so much better than reading, I did this business law internship for this business law firm and I want to do business law. I mean, I start yawning when I even hear myself saying that.
I think, and I am no expert on personal statements at all. This is totally Mike's wheelhouse, and this is not my wheelhouse. My sense is that if you want to talk about what kind of law that you have familiarity with, you talk about the passion that you developed. You talk about what makes it different to you. What makes it? Did it push you to want to pursue law school more? What about it? Did you like the intellectual challenge? Did you like working with lawyers, and what was that dynamic like? Did you discover something about lawyers that you didn't understand before? What about it actually pushed you a little more towards law school, not just the actual core of the work? Like, I wouldn't spend it talking about the ins and outs of whatever area of law it is, just as Mike said. I would go about it as, what are all the other things about this job that actually made you more interested in law school, affirmed your passion for law school, or actually changed your mind about something about the law? Those types of things give you, the admissions officers, more context into who you are as a human being. Like, at the end of the day, like, your personal statements should be trying to get these admissions officers to know that you're a human and that you're different than other humans, right? So I think I would shy away from just like focusing on the core of the law and more of everything else about that job that differentiates you.
Yeah, personal statements are interesting. So definitely you want to humanize yourself. You need, they're not about writing all these polysyllabic words to impress someone who's not going to be impressed by them. Passion is a two-edged sword because sincerity is very important. You definitely want to sense sincerity in the application, but let me give you an interesting example of how passion can hurt you. This is an election year. You may be very passionate about the election, but there are going to be 50,000 personal statements, or 25,000 about the same topic. So you better find a differentiated way to express that passion. Or again, the typical admissions officer is reading these things at home on the couch with their children playing in the background in college football. Well, maybe not this year, on TV. And if they read 13 personal statements in a row about the election and you're the 14th person, you're not going to get much of their attention.
How does applying early decision affect your financial aid?
Yeah, I would say that if merit scholarship money is important to you, think very hard, not hardly, on whether you want to deleverage any negotiation potential. Because when you apply early decision, you're essentially saying, by almost every school's contract, if I get into that school, I will withdraw from every other school. And then you have no negotiation leverage at all for scholarship. I mean, you're basically relying on the human side of admission for someone to give you merit aid. So, and we have a blog on this too. If it sounds like I'm selling our blog, I promise you I'm not. I think we get about 2,000 visits a day. So 2 or 3 more aren't going to move our needle, but we do have a blog on that too. Should I apply ED? I think it's called To ED or Not To ED.
Well, I visit your blog at least once a day, so you know who one of those people are. Let's see here. Can you use the same personal statement for all law schools, or should you be tailoring it to each law school?
Yeah, generally what we do as a firm is we write one really good, we don't write anything. With our applicants, we navigate and edit and work in the process. They write the first draft. One really, really, really good personal statement. It's unlikely if you're applying to 15 law schools, you have 15 awesome different topics. You probably have 2 or 3, but you don't have 15. We write the draft of an impeccable top 1% personal statement. And then relative to if you're applying to 12 schools, there might be slight variations in the prompt for the personal statement. For example, Berkeley says it can be up to 4 pages. So sometimes for our clients, we have the standard 2-page personal statement, and then we have a 3-page personal statement for Berkeley, which really is just signaling to them that you're interested in their school because you took the time to write 3 pages, which makes them think that probably you wrote that personal statement just for them. But I wouldn't go into this process thinking you need to write 3 unique personal statements. I would go in thinking you need to write one really good one and then maybe vary it from school to school, but maybe not.
What's your opinion on how do you know when you need an LSAT tutor? Should you go it alone, or should you always get a tutor, or how do you know?
Right. You probably know better than I do. I've never taken the LSAT. I have taken the GRE and the GMAT, and maybe, I guess, at a high school with some other tests. I can't even remember the SAT. I was always a self-studier, and I knew that, and I knew that I didn't want someone like yammering in my face like I'm doing to you all now. So the way I studied for the GMAT was I got a computer software program that told me why I got questions wrong. For many, many people, that's not the case. For many people, they would rather someone instruct them. And in many cases, they would rather someone instruct them one-on-one. So it really depends on your learning style.
How do you find a good law school for you in particular? Is there a database that you recommend? Or
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question, because generally you don't know until you visit. And then how are you going to be able to visit in the near future? It's just a whole different world, unlike ever before. So what I would suggest you do is I would read online, not in the law school admissions websites, but the law school websites like Reddit Law School. But also, I mean, the internet's a funny thing, right? Because people don't generally go on the internet, and they do. I mean, our firm is blessed by this, but they generally don't go on a firm and go online and talk about how great something is. Most recommendations come in the form of pejorative recommendations. So if you go to read about Brown Law School and Princeton Law School, you have to be a little bit wary that the people more motivated to go online and talk about Brown Law School or Princeton Law School are going to be the people who are tremendously upset with right? They go on because they're angry at the time. The only time I flew X Airlines and they lost my dog, you better freaking believe I went online and talked about how angry I was at Airlines. But there might have been 1,000 other people who had great flights that day. So it's hard to answer that question. Look at law school transparency. Look at don't look at freaking Princeton Review, who has like a happiness rating, but they give the surveys to the law school admissions office. So what do admissions offices do? They go find their 10 happiest students and call it a day, right? The best way to possibly do it, if possible, is to talk to students at those law schools.
I
saw online you're at Brown Law School. What, if you have 5 minutes, what's your experience been?
I totally agree. I mean, you can find them on LinkedIn. You can find them on all sorts of places. You could even call up the admissions office and ask them for recommendations. Although they probably will. They're going to send their happiest. But but I think go on LinkedIn, search for people who are currently there or just recently graduated. Sometimes I like to do both. Recently graduated will be brutally honest with you about how they feel about whether their degree was worth it or not. So I think you just need to talk to people who went there and get their experiences, see if they thought it was worth it. I mean, I think that picking the right law school for you depends on so many different factors. Do you need scholarship money? Do you want to work for the Supreme Court? Do you want to, there's so many different things that go into that. What type of practice area do you want to be in? It's just really, really a hard and subjective question that you honestly need to just talk to a lot of lawyers, talk to a lot of law students, find out how they made these decisions. It will help you navigate it as, another human being has navigated it. It will help you understand what were their considerations in picking law schools and what should you be considering in picking law schools. And after you talk to a few people, you might be really surprised that the criteria that they use to pick law schools may be completely different than what you originally thought you wanted to use to pick law schools. So I would talk to lawyers, talk to law students. There's just no substitute for that. You can't go do 8 hours of internet research, as Mike says. Like, it's just simply not going to help you. Like, it's very, very hard for you to know what sources online are credible, what you can believe, how you should weigh any of that information. Like, talk to a human being.
And one more, those are all spot on, so well said. The one other thing I would mention is far too many people in my career way overemphasize the 7th ranked school must be better than the 8th ranked school and so forth.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what does that even mean?
Garbage. That's complete garbage.
Right. How is it one better or one worse, even at a macro level, but for any individual? So I wouldn't get caught up in this school's ranked 14, but this school's ranked 15, because at the individual level, that has almost no meaning. The 3 law schools I went to, which is incredibly the 3 law schools I worked for were ranked less than the one before. And that is almost career suicide in higher ed, because higher ed is so elitist. But I didn't care. I wanted to leave a mark. So I went from Vanderbilt to WashU to Colorado. Generally, you would do that in the other direction, but I wasn't looking at rankings.
Let's see, you have another question in here. When I was drafting my personal statement some time ago, I had mentioned a U.S. senator that used derogatory remarks against Dominicans, and I'm Dominican. I was advised to stay away from that topic or from doing so because schools and donors may be put off by this. Is this true? Does that stand for upcoming cycles?
No, I like that topic. I've seen that topic. I mean, it would be hard pressed for someone to find a topic I haven't seen before, but I've seen very similar topics. And if you caught fire, if this senator was pejorative or, derogatory towards you, and that lit a spark in you, I think that's that's sincerity and that's passion, and that's a great topic. So I would say, unless by some freakish chance, the person reading your file happens to agree with that senator, which I can't imagine in a million years, to me, that's a really good topic. I feel comfortable to say someone who's done law school admissions for their entire adult career, to whoever said to you that's a bad topic, I disagree strongly.
Let's see. Hannah said that she wanted to know if there was a database or a quiz that could help her narrow down.
Yeah, I mean, that's so weird. That's an interesting question, because since we do it as a firm with our clients, we do it based on we have 180 years plus admissions experience alone at our firm. So we just do it out in phone conversations. I think law school transparency has something called like a wizard.
So Access Lex also has a tool called Explore JD
Right.
that allows you to do that as well. And so in Access Lex, it's a completely free tool. They provide tons of great free resources. If you haven't looked up Access Lex, you definitely should. They also have financial advisors who can talk to you about how you can pay for law school, ways that you can find scholarships, all sorts of amazing things. They're federally funded, nonprofit, great organization. Definitely use everything that they have. But yeah, I don't know of actually the law school transparency one, Mike, so I'll take a look and see if I can find it.
And I don't even know if it's free or not. Access Lex might be the way to go.
Okay, so how do you know you need a law school admissions consultant?
We actually have on our website again, we have a whole page. It's called Admissions Consulting 101, and it speaks very candidly about whether you might need one or not. A lot of people don't. I think that there's actually over 50 different law school admissions entities out there that we've been able to find. The vast majority have no law school experience as far as admissions. And the ones with, not all, there's a couple who I respect, but the ones with no law school admissions experience tend to tell applicants, I saw a video of this one guy who actually had 0 law school experience, but he said he was a former dean of admission at a law school. So he was actually, that's a
fraud.
Right. And on his video, he said that 80% of the law school decision was your personal statement. So someone happened to just send me an email and say, hey, this guy he was a former dean of admissions is saying this. So I got intrigued because no former dean of admissions would really say that. And we actually called out his fraud, and then all of a sudden that video disappeared. And I don't know what became. I'm too busy to like find out whether he got prosecuted or not. But one thing I would say is 80% of law school admission are your numbers, or at least 75. So if you're above both medians, like, and you call our firm and you say, all right, my top 3 schools are these schools, and you're above the medians of those 3 schools, we tend to turn you down. We tend to say, just don't be an idiot. Button up everything. Have someone proofread it. Don't go crazy aggro in your personal statement. But then again, if you're above medians and you have major character and fitness issues, you probably do need us, because that has to be worded in a very, very particular way. You need to tell the story, but you don't need to tell an 8-page excuse of the story. Where I would say admissions consultants can help is if you're at a 47% chance of that school and you want to turn 47% into 52% chance. So if you're willing to pay $1,000 for help making an A+ essay to go from 47% chance to 52% chance, then you're a great candidate for an admissions consultant. If you're at 90% chance, I wouldn't hire an admissions consultant. 9 out of 10 times you're going to get into that school. Just be very risk averse in those situations.
I think that's all the questions that we had from the registrants for this session. Does anybody else have more questions? Feel free to chime in. If not, I can ask some of the ones from last session that we didn't get to.
Well, it's actually a good time because I think we're scheduled to end at noon. Is that right?
Yeah, we have like 2 minutes, so we can end early. I know you have a very busy day. I
do have a busy day. I'm traveling tomorrow. That's why it's so busy. We're at Twitter. We're Spivey Consult. We tweet a lot of data, and I've learned that if I put things in my Instagram story, that people who could potentially get mad at me, like U.S. News and World Report, when I know things that ahead of schedule, don't. So I'm Mike _Spivey _ on Instagram, and recently I did put a really interesting thing in one of my Instagram stories that I never got an angry phone call. So a day later. So we're finding ways to get confidential information out there without upsetting entities that might get upset. We try to provide as much. I mean, we would never break the law, obviously. But if something is handed to us from a law school and they say you can share this confidentially, we try to find ways to share it.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mike. I really appreciate you being here for another round 2 Ask Me Anything. And yes, everybody, please, follow Mike on social media. He provides tons of great information. Go read his blog because it's absolutely fantastic. And I will see you all back here on Thursday for another meetup. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Bye
everybody.